I'm really delighted to be here, and thanks for inviting me. It's fantastic, and as being a Swede, we are used to the snow, so for me that is not a problem, or a thrill either, actually. Just to make an explanation, why did I succeed doing things in such a short time? I would say it's due to two things. One is that Sweden have been working with gender equality for years and years, actually. So many people have been working before me and building platforms, and actually the parliament and the ministers have always been very supportive for gender equality, not always, but for a long time. And I think that is due to Sweden having been to war for the last 2 centuries or something. We have reached a higher level of equality in other matters, so I think that's why we sort of started off quite early in the 70s to really do change things. But then again, we are certainly not there yet, and I will show you why. And I started off being a CEO for, at that time, the advertising business, which that was like 16 years ago, 17 years ago now. I became the CEO of the Swedish Advertising Association. And being a CEO and a woman, you always have to answer all these stupid questions about how do you work with your family and how do you get your life puzzle to work. And you keep on talking about that all the time. And I really realized that no female leaders ever spoke about it. And I just refused not to speak about it because it was so obvious that I got different questions than others. So I started working with gender equality already by that time, but then I didn't have any real power because I was only the part of the business where I was speaking on behalf of the business, but they were actually doing the work. So this is the first time since for a bit more than 4 years now that I actually can do real things and not do fake things, which I've been doing since the advertising time. I realized quite soon that talking will just bore myself out and everyone else out as well. So I just took the decision quite early that I will stop talk, I will start to do, and then we can talk about what I'm doing. I made a book and I made leadership courses, and everyone has a lot of opinions about that. But at least we have something to talk about instead of just talking about how it should be but can't be because maybe there is some other reasons for not doing. So when I came into the film industry, I realized that of course the film industry wouldn't be any different from the advertising industry or any other industry really. But I didn't of course know the real arguments in the film business and what kind of glass ceilings you meet and how they look like. So I decided when I started off that I would give it 6 months just to figure out what was really the thing. But it took me only a couple of weeks to really understand, but then I pretended I didn't know. But what I did as well, one of the first things I did was I went to IDFA, which is a documentary film festival in Amsterdam. Do you know that? I mean, it's the biggest documentary film festival there is in the world. And they have these pitches, the forum pitches for financing. And I had never visited those before, so I was kind of new and sitting there in the audience. For those who don't know, it's always mostly broadcasters that are financing the documentaries. So the broadcasters that sits on the money are sitting alongside tables, and then you're selected to present your case. And you have it's very strictly, you have 5 minutes for presentation, 5 minutes for showing film, and 5 minutes for questions. And it was very clear to me in the beginning that there were only male projects coming up. And it's always like the director, producer, maybe some co-producer or some the major financer. And there were all these men sitting, maybe a female producer sometimes. But then men. And I got really sort of surprised looking around and see everyone is reacting about this and no one reacted. because they were really used to this. And but after a while, it came at least a Nordic person. It was a Finnish man. I actually don't remember his name, but he presented a case in a very Finnish way, which is there were two persons. There were the director and the producer. No one spoke English, more or less. So he made a presentation which was really unclear. And I was like, what is this? The only thing I got was the presentation of the case, which was, here comes the famous director who have made one film traveling around the world and winning a lot of festival prizes. So I realized this is probably a genius. So I was trying to figure out how the industry understood the geniality of him. And then he showed some pictures, and I would usually say it's a Nordic kind of pictures, but today I would say even Irish, very grey, a lot of 50 shades of grey, really. So you couldn't understand anything of the pictures, and I felt really lost. And then after that there was the questions, and the first guy, I think actually it was from BBC, who raised his hand and he said, you know really what, I didn't get anything of this. And I was like, yeah, relieved, we are too, not understanding. But then he said, but I know you, and you are such a talented director, and of course I have trust in you. I'm in. And I was like, yeah, and then we have, and which is a very symptomatic thing, then you have all the followers. So if the first guy, BBC, very strong financer, is in, everyone will say, yeah, I'm in too. And they have some weird explanations of why they made this very unclear decision. The next person was actually a woman coming from Chile, and she had her female producer with her. I think there were only two, and very femininely, as we all do, we prepare ourselves. She got the introduction as well. This is the very talented director. She made one film as well, traveled around the world and won all the prizes. So it was the same, but the difference came, and she had the introduction so well made, and it was really fantastic. She explained how she had been following her grandmother, who have had tea once a month with her friends since the 50s in Chile. And she explained all these female characters, very different. Someone lost their husband in the war, someone didn't get any children, and one was very promiscuous and very much into makeup, and the other one was very Catholic, and she hated that she made a short, you can see it in front of you, can't you? And then she showed pictures, and they were exactly these female characters. The Catholic one was really like, and the other one was painting her lips all the time. That was really fascinating. And then the questions came, and the first question was, first there were no questions. And then one raised his hand and said, yeah, really, what is this film about? And I was like, what is this film about? Chile going from a dictatorship through civil war into democracy, all these characters, I mean, it's obvious what this is about. But no one said that. Instead of, yeah, me too, I'm really not sure what this topic is all about. And you know what? You only made one film. How can I have trust in you? And then it's like, okay, here we go again. He, the genius, got everything without presentation, and she prepared to hell and got nothing. So then I realized that, okay, it's the same thing in the film industry, really. So I decided to make an action plan and to keep on my strategy, not talk but do. So me and my colleague, and as it's really stigmatized to talk about these issues, I've been trying to actually have my colleague to talk about it, because then I, as the head person of the Film Institute, could talk about other things. And in this way, I wanted the industry to see I'm not only into gender equality, I'm actually into film quality. That didn't work. because it's still, Anna, you're only talking about gender equality. Why don't you talk about film? I said, yeah, I am. But that was, anyways, the strategy that let her do the talking about the gender equality, and I do the talking about the rest. And we tried, having been in the advertising business, I realized what makes the press work. So we realized we just make a nice package of actions that we can present in a good way. So we decided to pick 3 to 5 arguments and make actions towards them. And we made a time limit. We said at the end of 2015 we shall fund equally between the sexes. Otherwise, I'm not afraid of quota. But I'm very strongly clear in we are not doing quota. Not because I don't think quotas work and I have no problems with quotas, but I don't want it to be a discussion between what that will turn out to. You have the male wallet and you have the female wallet. And the male wallet of money, earmarked money, that will be the quality money, and the female money will be the quota money. And I want all projects to be scrutinized in the same way. And it turns out when you turn stones that the male projects have not been scrutinized in the same way, and that is the big thing. And I just want to give you an example why I'm so certain that I'm right in this. There was this study made by the Boston Symphony Orchestra in the end of the 90s. They were trying to get female musicians to the orchestra because they were male dominated, of course. And they got a gender sort of consultant helping them. So what they did was that they made the musicians do the audition anonymously. So they put a curtain like they do on the stage, and the jury was sitting out in the auditorium, and you didn't see who came in, and they were playing whatever they were playing, and they went out. And then the jury got to pick the best ones. And the jury picked more men, which was very sad. And that is often what happens. You sort of end up with still more men, and then you have to dig one more layer. So they started first to dig the layer, why is this? Is it the biological reason that in men's DNA they are more musical or something? Or is it because they have longer fingers that they reach better maybe? Or is it the social construction argument that women take care of the family, they go home, take care of the kids, they don't have enough time to practice. So that's why the men are better. But before doing that, they did the audition once again with the same musicians. And this time they put a thick carpet on the floor. They made the musicians walk in, play their same songs, walk out, and the jury picked 50-50. Wow. Which is the explanation for why you should not believe your gut feelings. That you always need to realize that your gut feelings is really expectations. You expect men to be geniuses and women to be less. And now suddenly the equality was within the musician and not within the gender. And for me, no more arguments are really needed, but I've learned you need them. So what we sort of said was, we pick the arguments. The first argument you often get to hear is why there aren't so many women is there aren't enough competent women. And we all know history erases women. I mean, I got taught when I was in film science school that the first male long feature director, Griffith with The Birth of a Nation, which is not true. It's Lois Weber. She made 100 long feature films. When my own daughter went to the film school and making studies, they had one practice that just to show that you go to references and you know how to search in libraries, whatever it is. She picked Lois Weber to search for, and she couldn't find her. Not in one magazine. And I mean, we are connected with the whole world's magazines, I guess. And she said, well, Mom, what am I supposed to do? I said, yeah, you have to write about that instead. That you can't find that first person making the first long feature film. And I said, but how can I find anything about her? And I said, yeah, try to find out who she was married to. And she was married to someone, I can't remember his name, and he was a mediocre film director who of course had a lot of hits in the magazines. And in one of the hits it was actually said, and he was married to this very talented female director, Lois Dot. So that was really the history of Lois Weber. And that is the history of women in all parts of the society. So what we decided to do is to create a website for all the Nordic women filmmakers in the positions of script, producer, director, cinematographer, editor, and dig them out from the forgotten history, put them on the site, and make it like a Wikipedia that you fill in with the new ones coming. And first I approached my colleagues in the other Nordic countries, and they were like, yeah, that's great, Anna, yeah, you do. That's very common, you do. And then we started doing, I said, yeah, but you need to chip in some money. Yeah, we do. No one did. They didn't pay our invoices. And then suddenly they were like, nah, but we don't see how this actually benefits our work. So it turns out that will not be the Nordic women film, it's the Swedish women film. And then we have some, usually this is all like this, the grassroots movement. So in other countries, there are really women in libraries and in universities trying to help us, but they have no funding and they can't use their time any longer. So it's really very interesting. We will launch this site. It took us 3 years. It cost us a lot of money, of course, because it does. And you have to, every time you want to reach a goal, you have to have a strategy and a budget. And then everyone always says, but there is no money. And I say, we paid a lot of money during the past years for only men. So maybe it's time now to prioritize in our budgets, not to pay a study again in something we already have been studying for so many years, and put the money into something new. But that is a very, of course, challenging thing for others to do. When you make a strategy, it means that you choose something and you choose not to do something else. And that costs. Someone is put aside. And that is what's, of course, happening with our work, that men and women, because it's not within your gender if you are aware or not, but the ones that used to have an easier way to the money now feel really threatened, of course. And I understand that, because they have a harder way to the money. But I'm sorry, they still get half of the money. It's not like they're not getting any money, and women have not gotten any money for a long time. So I don't feel that sorry for them, but I really understand their position. The other argument, we are launching this site the 13th of April, finally. And then we will have a big weekend of inviting all these women directors and other key positions that are still alive. Then we picked the argument, there aren't any women because they are not allowed to get, they're not established enough. They don't know how to deal with bigger budgets or bigger staff. And we didn't know how to put that argument. We knew what we wanted to do, but then we had to construct the argument, really. So we put the argument, women don't get to make that second and third film, which is true. It's true for men as well. It's not like men have a highway to the money. Men struggle as well, but they don't have to struggle that much. So to get women to get established, which is actually the most terrifying thing with women, the older we get, the more experience we get, the better we are in arguing, and then the bigger threat we are, and that's why we don't get established. I mean, that is really the problem. So what we did was we connected 5 established female directors that made at least 3 long feature films. With 10 non-established, they only had to make 1 film yet. And we had a professor, she's in the picture, you won't see her. Her name is Anna Wahl, and she's the professor of gender and organization at the Royal School of Technology in Stockholm. So we gave them knowledge about gender structures, and we gave them process help by putting them together in 3-part groups with 1 established and 2 non-established, and they shared with each other what kind of barriers they had to get to the money. And it turns out that directors are very lonely, male and female directors. But of course, as women don't get even to make films, they are even more lonely. So this has been fantastic, and they've been working really closely for a year. Now we have to sort of repeat it, but we haven't done that yet. But it was a chaos when we presented this. So many arguments why this was a bad idea, Anna, in the newspapers. I'm telling the people that these women can't do things, and how can I tell them that they are not capable? And you know, if you don't want to be in a shower of arguments while you're thinking in the wrong way, you can't work with gender equality. It doesn't matter what you do, there's always criticism. So I'm a goose. Then there is this argument, which is very true, that there aren't as many young women as men who dream of becoming a director. And that is true. But when we realize then to do the why thing, why is this? And then it turns out when young women in pre-film schools tell the surrounding that I want to make films, I want to become a film director, the young women get to hear, wow, a film director, are you sure? That's a competitive business, and you realize you have to travel a lot, work day and night, over weekends, how will you manage? Are you sure? No money, very unsafe, blah, 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 blah. While when a young man says the same thing, he gets to hear, wow, a film director, you know, that's a very competitive business. But what the hell, you go? Hey, what have you got to lose? You can do it. And if you always hear that you are not talented enough, or there's too many obstacles, of course your self-esteem will just be pushed down. And that's why women don't just knock on the door to any producer and say, yeah, here's my portfolio, because they have no self-confidence. And we need to realize that, and that means that we have to educate on all levels in the really young film schools and up to the really professional film schools, because they are not aware of what they are doing. And I don't have time to give you some examples of that, but there are. Then we said, counted the percentage of women as compared to men doesn't lead to, and now I would change that. That's a made-up argument as well, because no one says that. But it doesn't lead to quality, I would now change to. Because that's what we hear. Well, you do gender equality, we talk about quality. And for me, gender equality means quality. But what we wanted to do, the action we really wanted to do, was to keep on gathering statistics and count every decision. Not only once a year, which everyone else does. You count once a year, you gather statistics, you do some analysis and research, and then you present it, and then you have to go to the printing house, and in the end of April, you have the printed version of your findings, and then you're halfway into the next year, and you sort of look into the printed thing and say, yeah, we're still not gender equal. Wow, that's bad. We have to work on this. And if you do that all the time, you never do any progress. So we decided to count every decision time, which is once a month in our case, and talk about it. So if you see that you're still, it's much harder for the female directors to get films financed fully. That's why we made this mentorship program, how to get the money. So we know in the beginning of the year, there's always more men, and then you have to talk about, but aren't there any women, and what's in your pipeline? And there is a very high awareness to scrutinize all projects, and not only saying yes to the male projects. It's very easy. Everyone's gut feeling is, this is a great project, while the female projects are, but they're a bit blurry and we don't really know. So we are monitoring all decisions, and that's why it's so important as well for us to just support the work that EWA does, to show that it's important for the whole society, of course, not only the Swedish. The last argument is that those in power have no desire to see things change. That's what feminists say, that the power doesn't say that, of course. But it is really true, and I will show you the numbers. But what we wanted to find out was, is there any differences between the industry of film if you compare it to other industries? So this Anna Wahl, the professor, she made a study comparing the film industry with the steel industry in Sweden. And she hasn't presented the results yet, but we know by now so much that I can say for sure. No, there isn't any differences. There are some, of course, different kinds of glass ceilings, because industry of steel is a very ancient industry, and it's a lot of old companies, and people work there their whole lives, while in the film business it's project-based, and they're very young, and they change people all the time. So of course there are some differences, but the major problem is exactly the same. So, I don't know if you see this, but just to show you the statistics, this is 2000 to 2005. I always say we have to, I don't know if you hear me, but we have to measure over time. To take a year each, everyone wants to do that because you want to be updated, but we make so few decisions. This is a long feature film. We make so few decisions that one decision can really tip over the statistics really badly. So I think over time, and time would be at least 3 years, more better would be like 5 years probably. But, so this is 2005. That was a female director before me. She was very much into gender equality, so she made a lot of actions, but she always said, we want gender equality, we aim for 40-60, which I think is rubbish. I think 50-50 over time, which means 1 year 40, maybe 1 year 60, but saying 40-60 means the goal for women is 40. Yeah. But she said, we want gender equality, but we will never stop working for quality, so we will not quota. So you can see, if you can, directors during those times were 19% directors, only 10% if we were not in the funding. So this is only the commercial money. Screenwriters 26%. There's been jumped here, but I'm sorry. Screenwriters 26, almost the same for the commercial side. Producers 28%, 16 commercial side. Then she left work, and the next female director said exactly the same thing. Gender equality is really important, but we will never give up on the quality. So during her time, it raised to 26% directors, 7 if the institute were not there, 37% screenwriters, 60 something was during those years, it was really bad. Producers 35% and 23 if we were not in it. And then 2012, I launched the gender equality plan, and I was very clear to the industry, I'm serious. I think I said that. Anything else but 50-50 over time is rubbish, and I'm not afraid of quota. And my God, the producers and production companies started searching for women to make them get the money, of course. So the last 3 years, 2013 to 2015, we have achieved 44% female directors, while the commercial money made 14%, 46% screenwriters, and they made 16%, and 56 producers, and the commercial side almost the same. And of course you understand that I started 2012 there, so 2013 it was 30%, and now we're up to 50%, but it evens out. So I'm very happy, of course, with the numbers. But then, of course, I get to hear, you're too focused on gender equality, Anna. You have lost sight of quality. And have I? This is the results. And this is very interesting. If you count our Guldbaggen, which is our Oscars, and if you count the prizes for best directors, screenwriters, and producers, over time, 60% women won. And if you go to the 6 top international awards, 40% of all awards were handed to women. And we all know how the international film festivals work. Berlinale last year, we had 7 films, which is really a lot for a small country like Sweden. There were 71% women, female, this is only directors, 71% female directors. And then there was a short program for Sami film with our indigenous people, and that was together with Canada, Norway, Finland, and us. There were 7 films selected. 3 of them were Swedish, 100% of them were women, and the other ones, and there were 3 of the shorts that had female directors, and they were all Swedish and women. So, I mean, it showed that the other ones didn't find any competent female directors, and funnily enough, we did. So, I mean, how does that work? Cannes last year, 6 films selected, no one in main competition, and that is now the big argument. Yeah, Anna, you have a lot of, side sections, but main competition. 33% women, and Cannes almost never finds any women. Toronto last year, 6 films. This is all-time record high for Sweden, 80% women. IDFA last year, 10 films. It was the talk of the town that the Swedes made 10 films to IDFA, 40% women. Berlinale this year, 9 films as well, record high, all sections, and we were so close to the main competition. It was a special opening gala was handed to the female director. And on the whole, it's 60% women. And when you look at this, you could first argue, do men have a problem with competence? Is that what this shows? As they always argued that before. And I would say, of course not. That is not the thing. I don't think that there are female directors are better handicraft or whatever it is. I think this shows that there is a lack of female perspective in life stories. Film always is about life and death and friendship and whatever it is. It's just suddenly it's with a female perspective, and there has been a lack of female perspectives. And as there has been a lack, it feels new and original and unique. So I say to all men that don't you worry, in some decades it will not feel as new any longer, and you can go back telling the story about your father again. But the other thing is that showing these numbers now to the established film industry in Sweden doesn't impress them at all. They only tell me, well, Anna, you lost focus. We need to be better in mainstream films. This is no good. Well, art house, no audience. We want audience. And then suddenly audience couldn't have female director. So it's not like I'm, have everyone with me. So I'm sure that we need to keep on the really intensive work. So we are now making a new gender action plan to be launched this summer, to be a follow-up. Some things we can sort of, yeah, we've done that, but other things needs to be done to sort of establish this. Because as you saw in brackets, the commercial money have not identified the same quality as we have. And yeah, that's their loss. Thank you.